Hey there, this is Kristen with a quick content warning. We're talking about disasters in this episode, which includes descriptions of physical injury and mentions of disaster-related death. If this is a sensitive topic for you, please take care. Thank you. This is Health Matters, a podcast from Mayo Clinic where we discuss the latest medical advice, news, and research to help you live a happier and healthier life. My name is Kristen Meinzer. I'm a writer and journalist, and this episode, we're talking about disaster preparedness. Sometimes it seems like there's a disaster everywhere you turn. Midwest tornadoes, East Coast hurricanes, West Coast wildfires, giant earthquakes, and towering waves on the other side of the world. So, how do you care for your health when your world might literally be falling apart? Well, this episode, we're talking with someone whose job is to expect the unexpected. Deb Teske is Mayo Clinic's Principal Emergency Management Coordinator based in Rochester, Minnesota. She knows everything about disaster preparedness from the home to the hospital. Deb Teske, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Not everyone likes to think about worst-case scenarios and disasters, but this is what you do every day. What inspired you to go into this field?
My personal motivation for getting involved in this field has to do with the fact that I've been in a number of disasters, and I found that when I respond in a disaster, I feel like I know what to do. I'm not one of these that panic. I tend to go into a calm mode and analyze, and my strategic planning skills come into great play. And so I just feel I can bring the most value to humanity through using the skills I have.
Well, we're excited to hear more about those skills. A lot of people are concerned about disasters, especially with all the extreme weather events we've seen in recent years. So let's just start off with the basics, being prepared. Even though a wildfire or a hurricane can result in wildly different conditions, some of the challenges they present are the same, and so are the supplies we need to prepare for them. Let's talk through what we should have in our go bags and emergency kits.
You look at supplies that you would need for 2 to 7 days or up to 2 weeks where you are on your own. So what do you need? Well, think about it. You need water. You can't go more than 3 days without water. So make sure you have extra water on hand and know where your water supplies are. Obviously, you need food, but what type of food you keep depends upon your own diet and what you need, and shelf life, because you need to rotate it, but you might not always rotate it as often as you would like. So whether it be freeze-dried food or canned food, and if you do canned food, don't forget your can opener.
Oh, gosh.
And then you also want to think about sheltering, because if you get too cold or too hot, that can also be a problem.
So something to stay cool or to stay warm, clean water, and food. Those are the bare minimum basics.
Absolutely. There are lots and lots of things depending upon where you're at, right? Everything should be based on your location. If you're in the north, you have to think more about winter. If you're in the south, maybe you need to think more about dealing with snake bites or something, or fire ants. That's one of the things I had to deal with when I was in Florida.
Wow.
But looking at what is in your kit also depends upon who you have in your family. If it's just you just need supplies for you. But if it's a whole family, you want to think about not only yourself, but maybe your children. What will they need?
What about medical supplies?
Everyone needs a first aid kit. But your medical supplies will obviously depend upon your own personal needs. Like for me, I don't take any medications, so I just keep my vitamins in my kit. But for others, they need daily medications. So do you have an extra supply Oftentimes you can go to your doctor and say, hey, I'd like to have an extra week supply to put into my emergency kit, and they'll help you with that. Think about your children. What do they need for supplies? Diaper, rash, ointment, those types of things. There are all these different things that you need to think about. And it seems overwhelming, but actually it can be pretty simple if you just keep a log on a week basis. What do you need? What do you use? What is it that you need in order to feel like you can maintain and live?
So that log idea, just everybody listening can, over the course of the next week, take some time to think about what is it that you use every day and pay attention over the course of 7 days, and that's what should be in your kit.
Right, exactly.
Let's talk about specific populations, though. You already mentioned kids. What other things are specific for kids that we're not thinking about off the top of our heads when an emergency is happening, maybe?
When we think about children, they also can get really overwhelmed by disasters. So besides the normal things like diapers and food, you want to think about what can provide them comfort. If they normally go to sleep with a blanket, you probably don't want to put their special blanket in your kit, but put a blanket in their kit. Or if it's a stuffy, take one that they are used to but maybe don't have all the time and put that in the kit. And also something that can help keep them distracted. Maybe a deck of cards or some dice, some paper and pencils for them to draw and color. Those types of things can really help, especially if you have to evacuate. If you had to move, what can you quickly grab in a bag to take with you?
And are you suggesting that maybe there's a separate bag for the kids and separate bags for the adults, so each human in the house has a bag to carry?
You can do it that way, or you can just put it in one bag. I would just put it in a place where everyone knows where it is so you can quickly grab it and go with it.
What about older adults? What special things should we keep in mind for a go kit for older adults?
So for older adults, you want to think about the fact that they might need additional help moving around. So is there a foldable cane that you can put in there? A list of their medications and what maybe their diagnosis is, so that if you didn't bring enough of the medication, at least you know what they're supposed to take so you can maybe go to the pharmacy and get more. Those types of things are very, very key when you're talking about older adults.
And what about people with disabilities?
Very similarly, for that disability, maybe you think about someone who's autistic. In that case, you might want to think about bringing one of those sound-deadening headphones, because you know that if you move to a new place, they're going to potentially be overwhelmed. Or if it's someone who's blind, for example, or can't hear, are there things that you can bring that help them communicate with other people? If it's someone who can't hear, maybe it's just a small little dry erase board that they can write down and the other person can write down to communicate with them.
Most of us don't just have humans in our families. We also have pets. What should go in our emergency kits for our animal family members?
Well, you know your pets. You put in their food. They have little small collapsible bowls you could put water in for them. And then whatever will keep that pet calm, maybe a special toy. When it comes to pets, one of the things to remember is if you do have to go to another location, not every shelter will take pets. So having a plan in another location where you know someone who's going to be able to take care of your pets if you have to leave your home. Maybe it's your Uncle Bob who lives 2 towns over who'd be willing to take your pet for a little bit and then put the pet kit there.
Now, I have to say, Deb, everything you've mentioned so far seems so doable to me. It doesn't seem scary. These are just things I already have in my house right now. But should I also be getting, I don't know, items like a wind-up radio for emergency? Should I be getting other disaster gear, things that preppers have? Are these things I should also be keeping on hand in my kit?
Remember, when we're talking about a kit, I'm actually recommending that you have a kit in your home. You have a kit that either is the same as the one in your home or a different one that you're going to grab and take with you, and then have one in your car and maybe even
Okay.
one in the office, depending upon whether the one in your car can also work for your office. So think about those different things. So when you're talking about what do you put in your car, for example, I recommend like a small emergency blanket or sleeping bag. So this is a sleeping bag that comes in a little small packet. It's about the size of my palm, and you can throw that into your car. If you're by the side of the road and your car stalls, it'll be there to provide you some warmth. There's also the little emergency blankets that you can throw in your purse. Maybe you're at a football game and it's really cold. You can pull this out of your purse and wrap up in it. It'll help you keep warm, even when it's not a real emergency, but I think cold can be an emergency.
Oh, yeah.
Having a water filter is a good idea. There's things like this. It's called Life Straw, or you can get different types. But basically, it's a small little filter that you can use when you go hiking. I don't recommend it on a normal basis, but in an emergency, you can use the Life Straw to drink from like streams or from other things, because if you're not going to be able to get to potable water quickly, you still need water to live. And it's better to have some water than no water.
And what about multiple changes of clothes? Should I have like 3 outfit changes, or should I not really worry about that at all?
You want to have at least one change of clothes for everybody. I think you want something that's functional, like a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, extra underwear, socks, and maybe sweatpants. Because in a disaster situation, if you need to change out of the clothes you're in, you do want to have something you can change into, so then you can wash the clothes you have and then maybe put them back on after they're dry.
I do have to say, though, some of the things you're talking about, they might be a stretch for people who are low income. How can people who might be struggling financially still be prepared?
What we recommend is maybe do one thing a month. You don't have to do a lot, but doing a little bit is important. And a couple of things you can do that don't really take any money is one of the key things in disaster: communication.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to communicate with your loved ones? Now, a lot of people think, I'll just grab my cell phone and call them. But I can tell you from experience that one of the first things that gets overwhelmed, if not impacted by disasters, are cell towers. So even if a cell tower is still functioning, they may not be able to get through. One of the times I was an emergency manager for a small county nearby, and they had a flood that flooded 2/3 of the town.
Oof.
And the cell tower was up on the hill, but that cell tower had a line that ran to the telephone office, which was underwater. So therefore, no one in the town could call anybody. There was one little spot that could get a cell tower from another area and make a text message go through. So you may not be able to make a phone call, but to get a text through, that only takes a short bandwidth. So you can often get a 1 or 2 word text message through. So
that's so good to
get
know.
with your family and identify, hey, if I'm okay, we are going to send this message, whether it be a code word or it's a family thing. Like, maybe everyone really loves pumpkins or something. And so if you just text the 1 word pumpkins, you know that you're okay. And then when you could get to a place where you can send longer messages or you can get a phone call through, then you can give more information about where they're at. And then you want to make sure that you have a place to meet. For example, if you had to evacuate your town for some reason, and maybe your kids are at school, you're at home, and your significant other is at work, and you all have to leave, where are you going to meet up? Maybe you're going to go to grandma's house or wherever it is. It's in a different town. Everyone knows where it is, and you can get together. That's a key thing you can do in planning. If you have to leave the house for a fire, where do you meet outside the house? Do you meet at the mailbox or do you meet at the telephone pole? There have been instances where a family evacuated from a fire. The dad went out the back door, the mom went out the front door. They didn't know that the other had already gotten their kids out. And then the dad went back into the home and he died looking for the mom and the daughter that was out the front door. So having that communication, everyone knowing where to go, is a very simple thing you can do to help make sure that your family is safe if there's an emergency.
In a lot of ways, that sounds like one of the most important steps for emergency preparedness is communication. And as you said, that doesn't cost anything.
Absolutely. Everyone needs to take responsibility for themselves, but also it's important to look, are there ways you can help your neighbors? Do you have an elderly neighbor that lives next door that maybe you can go and check on them? Or if you have an elderly parent that lives a ways away, do you know who the neighbors are around? Maybe you can get to know them so that you can call them, hey, I haven't heard from Grandma. Can you go over and check on them? So just making those connections and doing a little planning ahead of time can go a long ways to helping you be resilient in a disaster.
Now, I do have to note here, some people are probably listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, should I be freaking out? What is the appropriate level of concern people should have versus going full on doomsday prepper here?
I think the important thing is to have a plan that you feel comfortable with. You don't need to have everything for a doomsday event, because in the event that happens, whatever you planned is probably going to be out the window anyway. You just want to think about, what are the most likely things that I should plan for? And what I recommend is you just think of 3 basic things. How do I shelter in place in my house? What do I do and what do I need to take with me if I have to leave my house? And then what do I have to do and how can I plan if I have to leave my town? Just make sure that you have a plan, because I can tell you that one thing that is most important is not to panic. Because if you panic, you're probably going to freeze or you're going to flee in a direction you probably shouldn't go. But if you have a plan to get started, it's sort of like a rock rolling down the hill. Once you get started in a good direction, then you can continue that planning and figure out where you're going to go next.
Everyone should have an emergency preparedness kit that includes the basics: food, water, shelter, and first aid. But what your kit looks like will also depend on your specific needs. Do you have children or pets in the house? Do you have any medications you need to take? It's also a good idea to have one kit for your home, a go bag in case you have to leave town, and one kit that stays in your car or maybe even at your place of work. But it's not all about buying supplies. One of the most important tools is communication, and that is completely free. For example, you can set a meeting place for your family or household if you have to evacuate your home or even leave town. You can also come up with specific messages you'll send loved ones to let them know you're okay. But when a disaster actually does happen, all kinds of unexpected injuries or hazards will put your preparedness to the test. Let's talk about staying safe in the aftermath. Now, let's imagine a specific emergency and talk about how you would deal with the disaster aftermath. What about an earthquake, for example? And let's say specifically during the earthquake, somebody is dealing with a physical injury. Perhaps things were shaking and things shattered and now there's broken glass everywhere. Maybe somebody's dealing with an open wound. How would somebody deal with a physical injury under those circumstances?
Let me tell you about the story where I had to deal with someone bleeding. So I was on a boat with my teenage brother and some friends, and we were about 20 minutes or so away from shore when my teenage brother, being a teenager, decided he was going to grab the two windshields and swing down into the cabin, which you can imagine what happened is the windshield broke.
Oh my gosh.
And then he fell into the cabin. So I went down and I saw there was blood everywhere. So the first thing to do is not panic, because your panic is not going to help him. So you do an assessment. So he's yelling at me, saying his leg hurts. So he's breathing.
Of course conscious. It hurts.
First things you check, ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. I did a quick look over him to see what the issue was. He had this big scrape on his leg, wasn't deformed. He seemed to be moving it well, so that wasn't the issue. But his hand was pulsating blood. So I'm like, that seems to be the first thing I need to take care of. You want to stop the bleeding as quickly as possible. So first thing you do is you grab something, clean cloth or whatever you have on hand, and apply pressure to stop the bleeding. So for the next 20 minutes, I kept applying pressure because it kept bleeding. Once you apply that, you want to keep it on there, and if it soaks through, you just put another piece of cloth over it and keep applying pressure until you can get to medical care. If you are in an area, maybe you're on the top of a mountain and it's going to be hours, there are other things you need to think about. You try to stop the bleeding by applying pressure, but if that doesn't work, you might want to consider using a tourniquet. So a tourniquet is another thing that you can have with you. If you don't have that, you can always use a strip of cloth at least 2 to 3 inches wide, and then you take a pen or some other stick and wrap it until you can apply pressure above where it's bleeding to try to control the bleeding. Once the bleeding is controlled, always the best thing to do is get there and let the professionals do it. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere, you do want to try to clean the wound with clean water and then put the bandage back on it and keep the bleeding under control.
Oh, I'm so glad you also had an answer of what to do if it's hard to get to the hospital, because in a disaster, frequently it is hard to get to the hospital because sometimes the roads are down, sometimes there's flooding, sometimes there are a million other reasons why you're not going to be able to get to the hospital in the next hour, possibly not for several hours. So that's great. Let's talk about another scenario. Let's say a building has caught on fire. As a result, air quality is now very dangerous. How can people best protect themselves?
So in that situation, the key is to be able to listen to your local emergency responders because they will have the best information. So in that case, having an emergency radio on hand or at least a way to get information on your phone. The reason I say that is that depending upon the hazard, some hazards are lighter than air and so they will float away, in which case you just want to stay in your house, close windows, doors, turn off your air handler, and wait for it to evaporate. However, some are heavier than air and they settle near the ground, in which case sometimes you need to evacuate. You certainly need to stay away from lower levels, and maybe they're telling you to shelter in place and go up to your second floor or put towels along the bottom of the doors or any place that outside air may come in. In any case where there's concern about outside air, you just want to turn off your air handler inside your building. If you're in a office building, often they have special filters and things already on their handler, so just don't worry about that. They should know what to do and will also be told by the local responders what they should be doing.
Let's talk about food and water some more. So you've already said this, food and water are important. Clean water But let's say we don't have a life straw. How can we make sure water is safe to drink?
There are a couple things to think about. One are things like sediments and things that could be floating in the water. So that requires filtration. And then there are bad germs and other bacteria, viruses that can be in the water as well. So you want to be able to filter the water. You can look it up, and there are ways to create your own filter. But even after you filter it, you want to heat it to kill any germs or viruses that are there, either by boiling it, if you have some sort of heat source, which is a good thing to have. You can get those little camp stoves. If you don't have that option, there are ways to use bleach and or hydrogen peroxide to kill some of those germs. And then it's just a matter of getting the right ratio, which is a good idea to have written down in your kit if you don't have that.
Let's get into food then. So we need calories to stay alive, but how much should we be focusing on nutrition? Is there a base level when it comes to nutrition that we should just worry about sticking to that bare minimum and not worry about anything beyond that?
Obviously, we need the calories for energy. And the more stressed you are, the more calories you're going to use. But I think it's also important to remember that when you're stressed, you also impact your immune system. So making sure that you have sources of the various vitamins that support your immune system can be key, whether that be vitamin C or zinc or some of the other things you might take like echinacea to help support your immune system. Because when you're in stress, you're also more likely to get sick.
All right, let's move on to, this might be uncomfortable for some folks out there, sanitation, because we still need to do things like poop even during a disaster, but we don't want that to contaminate our precious drinking water or food. How do we take care of sanitation during a disaster if, for example, our water is down or we can't get to regular facilities?
So the first thing to remember is that in your house, normally it flows down. It's just a matter of getting an amount of water in to make it flush. So unless we're in a flooding situation, normally the sewer will continue to work. You just need to put enough water into the toilet for it to flush through. But say that's impacted or in an area where there isn't working sanitation. Generally speaking, for short periods of time, it's a matter of bagging it up. You just take a bucket and you put a grocery bag in there, a garbage bag, probably double layered at least. And then you just tie it up afterwards and you put it away from where any people are or any food are, preferably in a garbage can to keep it contained so the animals don't break into it and get it spread all over the place. For longer term, then obviously you're going to want to think about burying it or some other way to keep it away from wherever the source of water is and or people.
That seems pretty straightforward. I have garbage bags in my house.
You just want to add a little bit of something in the bottom to absorb it, whether it be baking soda, kitty litter, obviously would be great to have around. It's another good thing to have in your kit, especially if you live up north, because it's great to give traction for your vehicle.
Oh, yes. I remember that when I was growing up in Minnesota, a lot of people had kitty litter in their trunks. You've hinted at this already, but I want to dive into it more because I feel like it's a really under-discussed injury, and that is psychological trauma. Even if a person's body is safe and sound during a disaster, they might have seen and experienced things that will affect them for a lifetime, whether it's the loss of a person, a home, a pet, or even just their internal sense of safety. So what steps can people take following a disaster to care for their mental well-being?
I think psychological safety is very important. And it also helps you take care of yourself in other ways, because if we shut down, then that doesn't help you and doesn't help those people around you. There's something called psychological first aid, which is a course you can take that will teach you some of those key ways to manage that type of response. And so the key is to make sure that you stay connected to your support system. And everyone gets support through different ways. We have introverts, we have extroverts. The extroverts, they need to talk things out. They need to think through things with other people. The introverts need to have a way to just be by themselves and to be able to process. For some people, what helps them process is maybe doing a crossword puzzle because they're thinking about something else and engaging a different part of their brain. So knowing what works for you in advance is very helpful because then you can plan to have that with you in the event that you need it, and also plan for those around you to help them.
In the event of a disaster, we might not have access to the facilities and medical care that we're used to. If there are environmental hazards, try to get the most up-to-date information from authorities about what actions and precautions to take. For serious physical injuries, in most cases, you're going to want to treat it as best you can until you're able to get someone into professional medical care. But while navigating injury, food, water, and sanitation, don't forget to also look after your psychological safety. Your mental well-being is critical to navigating the physical challenges you might be up against. When a disaster strikes, we need hospitals more than ever. But disasters can strike hospitals too, so let's learn how hospitals and healthcare professionals prepare for the unexpected. Let's talk about how medical institutions plan for things like disasters. For example, extreme weather emergencies. What happens if a hospital loses their power or a building gets damaged during an emergency?
Well, this is what I do every day. So my job is actually to help Mayo Clinic plan and then take those plans and train the staff how to use those plans, and then we create a scenario, we make something up, and we take the staff through the plan to see how would this really work. So, for example, we will put some actors, we'll make them up, we'll bring them into the ED and pretend like there's a real mass casualty happening, and then they will walk through their plans and use their training. And we'll see how it works, because everything looks great on a piece of paper until you actually try to do it. And then you find, oh, well, we forgot about that little thing. And how are we going to keep track of that? Because we're not going to be able to use our neural processes. All those little things are things that we try to help Mayo Clinic get prepared for ahead of time.
And are there emergency generators to actually not just keep respirators and basic equipment going, but to perform surgeries and do other heavy lifting, no matter what the emergency?
Absolutely. We have to have a plan for 96 hours for the hospital to continue working, regardless of what may fail. So we have generators. They may not cover everything, but they will cover all the essential equipment that we need in order to keep our doors open. And what we do is we have continuity plans where we come up with, if there is issue with this building, or if there's issue with power, or if there's issue with water, how are we going to continue to provide the care that we need to do? And so we plan what happens if there's an impact to space. We plan what happens if there's impact to staff. Like there's a big blizzard, we can't get new staff in. How are we going to continue? We have an emergency staffing plan in order to do that. What happens if we don't have the right supplies? We have a stockpile of certain critical equipment and supplies so that we can continue even if we don't get resupplied from outside.
That's so reassuring. Fortunately, most of us listening now are safe and healthy at the moment, so that gives us a chance to think ahead. How do medical providers factor into our emergency plans?
What we recommend is that you have a couple of options and write down locations and phone numbers for key things like your local pharmacies. What if your normal pharmacy is out? Do you know where the other pharmacy is? And do you have a copy of what medication you take? So ask the doctor to print out what are your medications and what are your diagnoses so that if you have to go to another doctor, you have that for them. Know where your local medical offices are and maybe an alternate hospital. Oh, I always go to that one. Well, what if the road is blocked and you can't get to that one? Is there another alternative that you could go in a disaster situation? Just know what your alternatives are. That will not only help you, but will also help the healthcare system help you.
That's a great way to end this conversation, Deb. Thank you so much for your time, expertise, and calm reassurance today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Stay warm.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not just us everyday folks that need to prepare for disasters. People like Deb spend their days thinking through all the things that could go wrong and how hospitals can prepare for them. So, whether you're a healthcare provider or just a regular human, consider what steps you can take this week to be a little more prepared. Maybe set aside a few extra gallon jugs of water at home, learn where the second nearest hospital is, or throw an emergency blanket and first aid kit in your car. You never know when a small action could pay off, though let's hope you never have to find out. Okay, that's all for this episode, but if you've got a question, a topic suggestion, or a follow-up question about this episode, you can leave us a voicemail at 507-538-6272. We might even feature your voice on the show. For more Health Matters episodes and resources, head to mayoclinic.org/Health Matters. And if you found this show helpful, please subscribe and make sure to rate and review us in your podcast app. It really does help others find the show. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take care and stay healthy.